I think that if you look at the state of security, people prefer to say insecurity in the country, it should worry because it's one of the first major signals of the descent into state failure. Because by its very definition, the state exercises the authoritative monopoly of the means of violence. When all kinds of non-state actors can exercise those same powers, then the legitimacy of the state is in big question. We're in a moral equivalence of war, and we need to approach things from that perspective. We need to have a war cabinet. We need to have the most serious people in our country take charge of solving the problems. I mean, just look at this face-off with Emirates Airlines. When they'll fly into Nigeria full and fly back empty because they don't accept the credibility of certificates issued by health authorities in Nigeria. That should be considered a big slap on the face, not to go back to Emirates and say, who, huff and puff. No, but how do you prevent this kind of thing from being the perception? Because there are loopholes cleared in the system that make people perceive that. How do you solve the problem? I was flying out of Abuja a few days ago. At the lounge at the airport was Ambassador Joe Keshi, and we were exchanging views on this matter. Ambassador Keshi was a Nigeria diplomatic rep in Sierra Leone during the time of the civil war in Sierra Leone. And the joke was that everybody was partying in Freetown. The Christmas was like 4 or 5 days of celebration. And I said, oh, there's some funny thing happening around the border areas. And before they could close their eyes and wake up, Freetown was that way. But what was clear to me, less than 48 hours after the election, was that the APC was determined to exclude some people who were at the heart of making it happen, at least those who captured power. And this is the result. This is where Nigeria is as a result.
Do you feel a sense of regret, Professor?
Sorry?
Do you feel a sense of regret of being part of the process of the APC?
Look, nation building is not a straight line graph. Just like entrepreneurship, an entrepreneur is a man who falls down 7 times and gets up 8 times. You try to fix it, it doesn't work, you try again. So I'm not worried that things went wrong. That's part of the learning. You get a return on experience. You realize that you were in this trying to build for the country, but many were in it not for the country, but for themselves. So you try to fix it. So immediately, party was founded. I went to the chairman of the party and I said, look, we need to create a process for socializing people into public life. We need to train people who are going to, run for office. We need to get people who are aspiring to know what this party stands for, its values, the basic ethics, the party plank, and all of that. I didn't get a resonance from those. I kept trying, and thank God everybody's still alive and they can, affirm this. I very frequently give an illustration. This witness, Mr. Okechukwu, who is CEO of Voice of Nigeria, walked into me discussing this very subject with the chairman of a party and argued my point and said I was right. There was no structure within the party to say our party is not going in the right direction. This is what we should do. The chairman said, but you have access. And I said, access to who? To who? I have never been invited to one meeting of a party to discuss how to build the country, how to make policy. Yeah, not one.
Professor
So you realize that things have gone wrong. So you want to change those structures, ensure that we have real political parties. Nigeria's biggest challenge right now is the electoral process, because the political process is fraudulent. Nobody can win an election in Nigeria today unless it is in a fraudulent track, because that is the way parties have emerged. More effort is invested in trying to con the process than in trying to win people's hearts and minds with ideas of where the party is going. So we must engage in serious electoral process reform. If we don't, our democracy is dead, is gone, is over with. And the only response you will get is more and more violence. And ultimately, sadly, anarchy. So every responsible Nigerian must realize that at the heart of our problem is that our electoral process is totally flawed. It can only produce criminals as quote unquote leaders.
Professor Utomi, at the end of the day, what's important and what seems important, I believe, to you is how to move forward. And you have rightly adduced to the political terrain in the country and how Nigeria employs its political leaders. Let's talk about the vacuum of leadership, because the problems are enormous. Hardly is any facet of the Nigerian society not bedeviled with several challenges. Let's look at the leadership vacuum that might, at the end of the day, have the capacity to put Nigeria back on track. Who are the leaders that you think, you have again said that we need to bring our best brains together in all sectors to deal with this problem? Where are they, Prof? And how will they attain political relevance?
Leadership is that we often look at political leadership at the top. Leadership is everywhere, in the family, in the schools, in the churches and mosques. And Nigeria is suffering from a collapse of culture. There is a collapse of values across the frame in the country. So the starting point for any conversation around leadership is an articulation of what the values of those people are. A setting of basic minimum acceptable standards. You cannot be our local government councillor if you don't have these kinds of track records, if you don't have these kinds of values, if you can't tell us clearly the things that you will do and measurable ways we can hold you accountable. If you can't do this, sorry, you cannot be local government chairman. All the way from there to president. Oftentimes we allow cheap sentiments to sway us, and we descend into a kind of tribalism, and I'm not talking about the ethnicity, that we're talking about here. Kind of tribalism, of, oh, this person, I have this relationship with the person, kinship or religious or whatever it is. That's not how societies fix their problems. Again, if I get repetitive in talking about how the Greeks saw society. At the base of society are people who think just about themselves. Me, inside my house, myself and I. Those people are called idiots. And those who see slightly above self, but only the people who have some kinship relationships with them, maybe it's blood, maybe whatever, and everybody outside of that is an antagonist. And those are called tribesmen. And the real people who see a common humanity and therefore forge a greater social good are called citizens. Unfortunately for our country, we have reduced our political class to tribesmen and idiots. So we have a real problem. We have to grow citizens. It's when we grow citizens that from amongst the citizens, we can select leaders. That's what the challenge is for Nigeria. It's not, the problem started it's been going on for a while, so we've got to rebuild. Nigeria was not like this 50, 60 years ago. You look at people who offered political leadership in the 60s, and you just take their basic values. My favorite example, there is a place called Government House in Enugu. The man who used to govern from there, Dr. Michael Okpara, had the authority to allocate land Independence Layout, GRA, man did not give himself one plot of land. So, several years on, former premier returns, he didn't even have a house to live in. People had to get together and find how to build him a house. Fast forward 40 years, the new people who occupy that position take over the whole state and give half of the land in the state to themselves. This is the damage that has happened to Nigeria in the last 40 years. And we can't fix it by calling a few names. We've got to begin afresh with civics classes for kids in primary school to say to them, this is what is important in life. You want to drive a Range Rover the day you leave school. You can't produce anything. Ultimately, this is where you will end up. And those kinds of things will enable us find leaders like the Michael Okbaras, who took Southeast or Eastern Nigeria from where it was in competition with Western Nigeria, Northern Nigeria, and could boast in 1964 that excised from the rest of Nigeria, it was the fastest growing economy in the world. Now, how do you compare the fact that this man did not even have a house for himself? But it wasn't just in Eastern Nigeria. I can tell you examples. Northern Nigeria, the Sardauna Premier of Northern Nigeria was trying to get a mortgage to buy a house in Kaduna. Some of you may know the story. And he couldn't. You know, General Hassan Usman Katsina, as military governor of Northern Region, put his name to get a housing allocation or whatever. The way I remember the story, the chairman of the commission came to him and said, sorry, it is not appropriate for you, since you are the man who signs it off, to apply. And he apologized. Has that Nigeria died? Why is it not possible to rebuild that Nigeria?